So this is Max Brickman. He's the managing director for Heartland Ventures. How long have you been in Columbus now?
About.
Touch the bottom and see if it says try it again.
Hello? Okay. About 6 weeks. I think that works. So, or maybe 8 weeks, but new.
And why are you here?
So we just expanded our fund here. So Fund 1 was in South Bend, Indiana. So you either probably know of it for one of two reasons, either Notre Dame or Mayor Pete. It's kind of what we have going on right now. But yeah, we're expanding here for Fund 2.
And why Columbus? And then talk a little bit about how long you guys have been around, Fund 1 and Fund 2, and what does that mean,
Sure.
from a expansion and ultimately setting up shop in Columbus perspective?
Yeah, so we're a bit different in the way that we operate. I'm sure we'll get into that in a bit, but we raised Fund 1 in South Bend, where we felt people were incredibly collaborative and welcoming, and there were a lot of family businesses there that had a ton of expertise and were interested in using technology. And we were looking at different cities, both larger and smaller, and we toured about 15 different cities from Louisville, Pittsburgh, Nashville, Indianapolis, and Columbus was by far, it's kind of everything that when we came here initially, everything that they said it was going to be. That people said it was going to be collaborative, and it was. When we got here, everyone was incredibly willing to make introductions and to be supportive, and it wasn't cutthroat by any means, but people were still able to help. And it's still the Midwest. It has kind of the culture that we were looking for, similar to South Bend, which people tend to associate with smaller towns, but the fact that Columbus, being as large as it is, can still retain that sense of community and just the way people treat others here is refreshing and nice, and that plays very well to our model and to where we want to live.
So how did you get into venture? Why did you become a venture capitalist? How did you get into this racket?
Sure, racket I think is a good way to describe it, but I got into entrepreneurship early on. So I started my first company when I was 14. Had a landscaping company in Milwaukee where I grew up, and was able to do that to save up enough.
You scaled it?
Didn't scale landscaping, but got enough to be able to buy kind of a rundown duplex in northern Wisconsin. Real estate was inexpensive at the time. Like I have two microphones. Real estate was inexpensive at the time. Was able to buy a property in northern Wisconsin, fix it up, and pull some money out and raise a bit more, and grew that throughout high school and the first year of college to about 450 units within Milwaukee. It was about $40 or $50 million in property, and went to school at IU. A couple IU guys here. Where I had an education startup. So that was kind of more of the standard operating investment side. Had an education startup that prevented cheating on exams. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Scantron, like fill in the bubble, multiple choice tests, blue books, machine graded tests. It's really easy to cheat off those. You can just look at the person next to you and see all their answers. So chemical engineered this paper.
No one in this room would do that.
No, not
right.
at all.
Present company excluded, of course.
Right, we all know secondhand, but chemical engineered this paper that lets you write normally, but if you look at it from an angle, it's completely black, so you can't cheat.
They want us to switch mics. Apparently I have the better mic. So, Brandon is telling me that he wants to hear from you and not from me.
Hello, cool. So yeah, it allowed you to write normally. If you look at it from an angle, it's completely black, so you're not able to cheat. So licensed that to a company in India and Dubai my senior year of college, and my girlfriend, now wife, was going to grad school at Notre Dame, so ended up in South Bend and had no intention of staying there. The plan was to go out to San Francisco and go into venture. I like the investment side, I like the startup world, not thinking that there was ever any opportunity to do venture in the Midwest, let alone a city of 100,000 people. And honestly, there's not a ton of deal flow in the city of 100,000 people. There are a couple of deals a year that come out. But what you do have a lot of in South Bend is these very successful family businesses companies that are doing several hundred million or billions of dollars in revenue that have been doing that for several generations, that are in logistics or manufacturing or manufacturing RVs, that have a ton of expertise within their industry, within their vertical, and a ton of buying power. They have a couple thousand employees in many cases, but they don't have the same access to technology on the coast. So if you're operating a company in Elkhart, you're at a disadvantage compared to someone operating a similar company in LA, because you're not seeing all the technology that's coming about. Whereas on the other side, you have technologies that are being developed in California and New York and across the country that are solving problems for businesses in the Midwest. And there's really no communication between the two. So if you're starting a manufacturing technology company in San Francisco, your customer base is here, or it's in the Midwest. But you don't know anyone in the Midwest because they consider it flyover country. So you're going to continue to build out your team on the coast, and you're going to jump from San Francisco to New York to Atlanta, and you're going to ignore this part of the country. Our thesis was that your customer base is here, you should be here. So we raised a fund from 30 of the largest family businesses in northern Indiana. It was a $15 million fund for Fund 1, and started finding technologies that were on the coast that were solving problems or developing technology for quote, midwestern businesses. And then we would help them expand into these markets. So for us, we felt aligned incentives. For our LPs, for our investors, it allowed them to get access to technology that was being developed around the country. For the startup, we were connecting them to their largest customers in the Midwest. So we were actually adding value for them, which allowed us to get into deals that we otherwise shouldn't be able to get into. And then for us, it de-risks it, because we're only investing in technologies that we've connected to their largest customers, and the customers say, yeah, that's a great technology, we want to become a customer, we want to use it. So we're able to invest, immediately bring on large customers, and then the other benefit is to the community, that now half their revenue is coming from South Bend, Indiana, or somewhere they previously didn't have a presence. They should have an office there. That whereas they previously didn't consider setting up an office in this part of the country, this becomes a way, in our mind, to be able to attract coastal companies to start investing and hiring teams in markets where they otherwise wouldn't. So it just sort of, not really answering your question, but it came about because I was in South Bend, and the opportunity really didn't exist to go into venture, and there was an opportunity to get creative. South Bend had a lot of resources, I think similar to Columbus, that I think was underutilized, and that was not appreciated by the coast. And that was the expertise and the buying power of these legacy businesses, the businesses that have been around for 2, 3, 5 generations. And coastal startups are not communicating with them. So we developed a company to connect them.
Yeah, I want to break the model down a little bit further, because it's actually a very unique, fascinating model. Your LPs, limited partners, as they're typically called in the venture space, the ones that are investors in your fund, you not only matchmake from a investor perspective with companies, startups, but you also matchmake from a customer perspective. Often your investors are becoming investors in those companies, and then ultimately also becoming customers in many cases.
Right.
So that seems sort of magical. Does it work as well as in theory it seems like that it could or should?
I think when there's an opportunity to align incentives, it does. That, in venture, it's all about information. If you had all the information about a startup, you would pick winners every time. And the reason most startups fail, I don't believe is because they can't get funding or anything else. It's because of lack of product market fit. That if, inability to get revenue, inability to get customers, if you have customers, you have revenue, typically funding will follow, recruiting will follow, talent will follow. So for our ability to get more information than the next VC, that means engaging the customer. So why not just bring in the customer during the decision-making process? So that's how we look at it, and it allows us to kind of increase our batting average, and then also actually provide support to the startup, where we're not the smartest guys in the room. There are other people, other investors that can provide better feedback to startups and better resources when it comes to having them raise a $50 million round or getting acquired. That's not what we do. But what we know we can do is provide introductions to customers, and that's all we do. So I think our ability to stay true to the one piece of value that we're able to provide, I think allows it to actually work. It allows us to de-risk the company by knowing customers want to use it, and allows us to keep the startups happy by adding revenue.
Is there a complication in the model where you have the investor relationships with your LPs that a traditional firm and fund would have, but then since you're also doing this customer matchmaking sort of part of it, does it add a level of complexity that makes it challenging to operate and sort of communicate and collaborate? Because I would imagine if you're making that many investor, quote, customer introductions, that's a lot of communication to be managing and tracking.
Yeah, and that's the biggest problem we have is communication, and that's going to be, if we have a downfall, that will be our downfall, and if we can't scale, that's going to be the reason we can't scale. Is, at a small scale, we can just make one-on-one introductions. We can find a startup that's solving a problem in manufacturing, and then find manufacturing companies that have expertise to be able to validate that technology, and then step away and see what happens, and if they love each other, then we invest and know that there's value there. To do that at scale is a whole different story, and that's what we're going to be running into in the next couple of years, just to be candid. I think we have a unique model that gives us more access to information, but it creates a ton of other problems. Now we have kind of a two-sided marketplace, similar to a lot of probably startups in this room, that we have the startups on the coast and we have the corporations in the Midwest, and we have to constantly be juggling them, and we have to constantly be making introductions between them, collecting information from those interactions. It doesn't help that they're 2,000 miles away and that we have to still track those communications, but that's going to be our biggest problem.
When you think about funding a company, is it a particular investor and then a particular LP that then sort of leads the round in some respect versus the firm and the fund sort of leading the round? How do you guys sort of approach what is often called syndication or round leading when the LPs have such early intimate exposure to the startups?
Right. So we raised a fund as opposed to raising money for each individual investment, which allows us to move quickly. So our LPs, our investors, the midwestern companies they're not voting. There's not a board. We're not waiting for them to say something, but we very heavily rely on their information they're providing. So we can move quickly. But typically, to your point, there's usually a lead that comes up. So if we take a software to 10 different customers that are our investors, and none of them step up and kind of want to become excited about it and say, hey, we should really be investing in this. Like, I want to use it and really become an advocate for it. Then that's a sign. We're not reliant on that, but the fact that the startup is able to get their customers excited and to become an advocate for them is usually what ends up steering whether or not we make an investment.
Okay, got it. What have you learned through the process? Because you seem, and Evan and I were talking about this earlier, as he was sharing some of your college stories. Look, he told me nothing salacious, so you have nothing.
Thank you, Evan.
Right, you have nothing to be concerned about. So you're not an old guy. What are you, like 27? That sort of makes me sad in a way, actually. So you're 27. You're now, managing director. Whatever that means. You gave yourself this fancy title. You're running this fund. You're doing, this investing, customer startup matchmaking. What's been most challenging for you and surprising, and what have you learned through the process? Or are you just that smart?
I'm not that smart. I think what I've learned, I'll start with that there's a lot. I'm always surprised by the people that are on the VCs and the startups that are on the coast that have never been to the Midwest. And I truly believe there's a difference in the Midwest and the coast in terms of buying behavior, in terms of culture, in terms of just the way you do business. There are a lot of differences. And it's concerning to me when you have a VC that's investing in robotics or in logistics and they've never been to the Midwest. Like they read about it, they talk to startups doing it, and they're told what the problems are. They're never actually speaking to the people that are living with these problems and that are interacting with them. And one, it makes me concerned that's happening on the coast, and makes me concerned about the success of some of these other funds and where this money's going. But I think it shows a lot of opportunity for the Midwest, that I think we collectively have a perspective that the coast does not have, in terms of the ability to develop technology that I think is best suited for the masses, that can be successful, that people on the coast don't understand. And from an investment standpoint, to be able to the ability to validate technology that will work here. Just because it works in San Francisco doesn't mean it's going to work across the country. But if it works in Columbus, I think there's a much better chance that it will work across the country. So I think what I've learned is, don't assume because a VC says a technology is solving a problem in the industry that they necessarily know, especially if they're in San Francisco and have never been to the Midwest. I think question that.
So if you're a startup in the Midwest versus on the coast, and you end up talking to VCs that are on the coast, and an investor from the coast implies good or bad that they understand what the problem you're working on and how you're trying to solve it, and whether they're supportive or not supportive. How much should a startup from the Midwest give credence to that? If indeed the VC probably hasn't spent that much time actually digging into the problem and spending time with actual customers who suffer from the problem.
Well, I think it's up to you to educate them, and I think if they're good, they should be willing to listen to that. And if they understand that you're the operator in your space and you're talking to 1,000 customers that have this problem, and you live it, and you're in the middle of it, and you can vouch for the fact that this is a problem, and you have proof to be able to support that, then it's kind of up to you to educate them. And I think that's what, where there's opportunity, and where I think a startup that's developed here, I think, has a brand that can be created and positioning that can be created to be able to go to coastal VCs and say, look, we understand this market better than the startups you're funding that are in Palo Alto, that went to Stanford and grew up in Menlo Park. Like, we get it, we understand it, we can scale this. Our seed investors were people that had this problem. Our advisors are people that had this problem. So I think you can kind of double down on that and just say, like, look, we're in the middle of it. We need your support for X, Y, and Z. You're going to help us raise a $50 million round when that time comes, and everything else. But I think you can double down on the fact that you have access to information that they don't have access to.
How do founders and a founding team strike the balance of that pedigree that you sort of described of, school that they went to, where they're from, et cetera, versus maybe having a better problem understanding and a better problem expertise versus the pedigree, right, from the traditional, this is the kind of entrepreneur that we fund as a VC firm. Because I think that's a challenge for many Midwest founders versus coast founders, is they may not have the pedigree that from an education or network or whatever perspective you want to sort of consider pedigree rolls up under, but they probably have spent more time understanding the problem and have spent more time with customers. But often those VCs are looking for the pedigree even more than the level of problem understanding.
Unfortunately, yeah, there's a lot of that, but I think if you see that, it's a good sign to walk away. Why?
Yeah, but what if you're desperate for money?
Well, if you're desperate for money, well, then focus on someone who's going to care about the things that matter. If you're not going to be able to compete on pedigree, then don't try to convince someone that does care about that that's just a hurdle you have to get over. That's going to be difficult to get over. I think an investor that cares more about the problem that you're solving and how you've been able to validate that is going to be a better investor long term anyway, and you're going to have better success getting them excited about what you're doing. If you didn't go to Stanford, you can't get them excited about that. If that's all they care about, it's kind of a dead end. You just got to move on to the next one. then you're just wasting your time chasing someone that isn't aligned.
Or give us a sense of the kinds of startups you guys are investing in.
Sure.
And what that profile of a startup looks like that is appealing for you guys and appealing for your LPs.
So we go all in on product market fit. I mean, that's I don't have venture experience before this. I am not, the best investor in the world, but what we have a lot of access to is customer validation, to be able to say, look, the experts that are the users of the technology, they know whether it's going to work or not work, so we leverage that. And I think if you can, I guess that's what we look for. We want to make sure that the people that are going to be using the technologies, which is not us, care about it. So if a startup can get their customers excited, whether that means investing in their product, if it means joining their board, if it means just becoming customers and becoming advocates, being willing to show up to the meetings, to an investor meeting with a customer that isn't a family friend, that's someone that truly is just a customer that you were able to get excited about your product, I think that's something that would get us extremely excited. Because once we've invested, what's going to matter is how quickly they can scale and can they continue to get revenue. So ability to get customers excited is very much representative of that. We can try to look at metrics all day long about why they are positioned better than the next person and try to analyze it. It's so much easier just to go to the customer.
And so companies at any stage,
so
companies that are even maybe pre-product, pre-revenue, all the way to some that have a little bit of traction but have not gotten to any sort of level of scale.
Yeah, so for our fund, we look at seed and Series A. So we want them to be far enough along where there's a product we can bring to our investors. But that's not just a concept where we can say, hey, do you want to use this product? Will you tomorrow actually become a customer of this product? Not if it were to be produced, because people tend to back out. They'll give false yeses. So we want them to be late enough that they have that, but early enough where if we can generate a lot of revenue and make a lot of customer introductions, that can still move the needle. So if they're doing $500,000 in revenue and we're able to bring in $1 million in revenue, that's really going to move the needle for what we need. And then the ability to be solving a problem for midwestern businesses, and that's kind of people can define that differently, but it's the things that people on the coast tend to associate with the Midwest. Not necessarily what actually exists here. So we do a lot of manufacturing, technology, logistics, HR.
Making things and moving things.
Exactly, because that's where we get our deal flow from, because people say, oh, you guys are in the Midwest, we're going to send you this technology, because that happens there, right? So that's what we see a lot of. A good example, a company that we're investing in right now, or that we have invested in, and actually today we just doubled our investment in it. It's called Strong Arm Technologies. So it's a sensor. They're out of Brooklyn. It measures, basically just like goes in your pocket, and it measures movement for what they call industrial athletes. So if you're working in a manufacturing facility or a warehouse and you're lifting incorrectly, if you're lifting outside of your strike zone, or you're lifting and twisting, or jumping off the forklift instead of getting off the forklift, it's going to record all that information and give you feedback to not do that so that you don't get hurt. But then it delivers that information to their supervisor, so the supervisor can come in and say, okay, instead of I saw you doing something you shouldn't have done, I'm going to now punish you and train you for that, to be able to actually look at the data and say, who are the 3 people that are most at risk to get hurt today, and why, and how can we have a good training opportunity for that? And then they collect that data and then sell it to the insurance companies, so the insurance companies are better able to underwrite these workers' comp claims, because they know exactly how people are getting hurt, not just that someone went to the hospital and said, I got hurt because I did X, when really it was accumulation of doing something very small over and over and over again. So they're able to have better data.
I was so hoping that you were going to say that it shocks them, but you didn't. So
that was version 1. They quickly.
Okay.
What we liked about it is that they're based in Brooklyn. A co-investor, another VC, brought us in on the deal, said, hey, this might be good for your LPs. We flew them out and did a tour when we were only in northern Indiana, across South Bend and Fort Wayne, to seven different major manufacturers. And they left with 4 paid trials.
Wow.
In like a day and a half. So their ability to be able to sell this, to defend their questions, to really articulate the value that they're able to provide. And then the same week, they also closed Walmart, so that was helpful.
Sounds like a pretty good week.
Yeah, for them, yeah. But it was customer validation. It showed that it was after they did a long-term trial, because they were able to reduce workers' comp claims by 40%. So they were able to really articulate the value that they were able to provide. It wasn't just, we help reduce claims. They actually did study after study after study in customer trial to be able to quantify, we reduce workers' comp claims by 40% when implemented, and when you extrapolate that out, you can see how your workers' comp premiums go down, your claims go down, your training costs goes down, because when someone gets hurt, obviously you have to bring somebody else in, and they can really make that argument for the employer to be able to sell this. So we had been tracking them over the last couple of months, so it's our biggest investment now. We've now put in, we put in about 1.5 million originally, contingent on some things, and then we today just doubled that. So it's our biggest for us. That's like, we have a lot riding on this one. So I hope it does what they say.
I can sense it in your voice.
Yeah.
That you're now happy about it, but also moderately concerned.
Yeah, I mean, it's if we don't perform well for Fund 1, we won't raise. Maybe we'll be able to raise Fund 2. We won't be able to raise Fund 3 or 4 or 5. That's the weird thing about venture, is you have funds that raise 3 funds before they actually have any exits, because just of timing.
It takes a minute to build companies, apparently.
Right. Couldn't just say yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of pressure, but then there's aligned incentives. We want our portfolio companies to succeed, and if that means, we're doing everything that we can to be able to help them. So I love when it's in a situation, we're not taking fees, we're not taking anything else, where we live and die by the companies that we're supporting. That if they don't succeed, and if we oversell them on what we can provide, that's going to hurt them and decrease their chances of success, which is going to come right back and bite us. So to really have aligned incentives that truly we both are working toward the same thing is one of the things I love about this industry, or at least the way most of it's structured.
So you and I are standing between people and booze and balls. So I'm going to ask one final question. I never thought I would say that in my life either, by the way. But I have a lot of those moments.
I think this is recording, so.
Right, yeah. I have a lot of those moments now. Will other VC firms follow suit and copy your model, given the early success that you're having with it? I mean, when we first met and you told me about it, I was like, holy shit, why is everybody not heading down this path in figuring out how to connect investors and customers into the same group to then match them with startups? So maybe you're already seeing it. Are you seeing others already move in this direction? Do you anticipate that? Or are you guys just that special that it's only you?
It would be flattering if funds do. I think the reason that funds haven't is because there's a perception that you have to be in San Francisco, which I think is completely false. Obviously, we're kind of leveraging that because there's a lot of deals there, but we're helping them expand out here. A lot of VCs, for whatever reason, feel that they have to be here, and I don't think this model works unless you're living here. You have to be living in Columbus or living in Indianapolis or living in a market like this to be able to build those relationships. And I guess fortunately for us, a lot of VCs, with the exception of a few, and some of them are in Columbus, aren't willing to do that, which is crazy. But what I think if we're successful, what we can do is show that there's opportunity in the Midwest, not just for coastal companies to expand here, but also to fund Midwestern companies. That because they're in close proximity to their customers, and because that's where they're getting their feedback from, they're leaving these companies to start their own business within this industry, like they understand it, it's going to attract more capital. So I think if we're successful, what I hope we can do is show the VCs on the coast that they should be looking here. And I think that we are already seeing, that people are, when we're meeting with other funds, whether it's always one of the first 3 questions, I've been hearing a lot about what's happening in the Midwest, the rise of the rest and drive and all these different things, and exits that have occurred here. What should I be looking at? People are starting to take the Midwest seriously. And I think that's the first step. And when a startup here reaches out to them, that they'll take the call and they'll give it an honest look, which I don't think was the case 5 years ago.
Maybe they've seen one of the 117 stories about Root that are now out there. And I say that with affection. Dan Mangus is a friend of mine.
Well, it's helpful to have
But
that
apparently,
one story.
apparently Root's in Columbus.
So I've heard.
Yeah.
Although I'd say Drive, I think more people in San Francisco know of Drive than in Columbus. Everyone knows Drive for whatever reason. And I think that's good for the region because it shows that people are investing here and that there's activity here. And so people start thinking, people have FOMO, what am I missing? Why are they doing this? So I think the more stories that come out like that, I think it's just going to just slowly push people in the right direction.
So before we release everybody for the booze and balls part, does anybody have a question for Max that they want to ask before we cut him loose and the rest of the festivities take place? Let's go all the way in the end first.
Hey.
I wanted to ask, what type of companies, fintech or manufacturing, or is there a specific industry that you're more interested in? And how much do you, factor into the team? Because, a good team can always come up with something and pivot and things like that, or do you just care more about the idea?
Yeah, I think we care much more about the team than the industry. I think some VCs focus more on the industry because they only have expertise in that certain space, so they have to do that, or else they feel like they don't understand it. But I think with any investment, it's 100% like more than anything else, always about the team. So the ability for the team to be able to hustle and show that they have traction, show that they can get customers excited, that they can do all these things that we were talking about. Yes, that helps show that there's product market fit, but it shows the team's ability to hustle and make that happen. I don't know if that answers your question. Cool.
And the other question was just to the right.
I guess if somebody was like approaching with your organization, and they have just basically 5 sentences to cover everything, what do you see as important in ranking?
Great question.
Yeah, it is. I think it would be good to get 5-sentence emails instead of what we actually get. I think proof cases. I mean, if someone said, in February I did this, March I did this, April I did that, in this in terms of being able to onboard new customers to say, people want this product. People that are unbiased are willing to actually pay for the product. I think it sounds simple, but if people are willing to pay for the product, that's most of the battle, especially for what we look for in terms of product market fit. I think another strategy could be, and I'd kind of turn it around, of the most interesting pitch I've received was someone sent me something that was like 5 sentences, and it said, this is what we do, this is what we're going to, this is who we have so far. These are our metrics now, like here are our metrics. I'm going to email you again in 2 months and show you what we've done. And then it forces them to, in a point in time, say where they were, and then in 2 months come back. And I was like waiting for the email. I was really excited, and they came back and they did what they said they were going to do. And we went back and made sure that they weren't just like teeing them up. They actually did, and then they did it again the 2 months later. And that was just so gutsy. I don't know.
One final question. If not, go hit some balls.
Thank you.
Help me thank Max.